That's not good. All right. Well, now we're recording, but it's on Facebook, so we'll get it from there later. Anyways, I'm going to share my screen and get this going because we're going to introduce a fabulous human. So Nakenya Allen was born in Berkeley, but lived with a single mom in Richmond. When she was 11 years old, she and her siblings were moved into foster care. Nakenya moved around a bit, but found a home with a group of other kids with similar situations out in Napa, California. And the staff were predominantly from LGBTQ plus communities. She doesn't think this arrangement was by design, but it was the best place she had ever lived and was able to grow, heal, and find the courage to step into the world. Nakenya graduated high school and after working with animals, realized just how much she loved them. So she graduated from Carrington College with a degree in Veterinary Technology and worked as a veterinary technician until her son was born 5 years ago.
Nakenya moved to the city of Martinez in 2005 and in 2020 was moved by the events unfolding in the aftermath of George Floyd, so much so that she decided to get involved with the community and brought the Black Lives Matter protests to Martinez. This was a first of its kind in Martinez, and the racial awakening was very raw, but she became the face to deliver this reality a few years ago.
In Martinez, with the help of strong allies, Nakenya was able to organize an effort to have Martinez local government start investing in diversity. They pushed for an anti-discrimination task force and to publicly remove racist and stereotypical and threatening items from public view, such as hate flags, items specifically quoting Hitler that were being sold in a downtown store, and more.
Nakenya's idea of community development was inclusive of white allies, not only educating them on how they contribute to the lack of inclusion in Martinez, but also empowering them to step in and make efforts to be part of the solution. Her work in this area brought a lot of attention to Martinez from experienced leaders in civil rights like the East County NAACP and a group called Together We Stand. Together We Stand actually sponsored a protest organized in part by Nakenya and provided security to help protesters feel safe.
And after doing a lot of work with the city leadership and seeing only negligible results, Nakenya decided to take her leadership abilities to the next level and run for Martinez City Council this past November. We had a lot of fun working with her and helping campaign and meeting at the farmers market and just chatting a lot. She did not acquire the seat, but did really, really well. Awesome. Her bio just says did well, but she did very well in comparison to the other the opponent or whatever. As a first African-American to have courage to run for leadership in this small town, Nakenya is currently a full-time caregiver to her special needs son and looking for opportunities to help her gain more experience to run for office as an elected official in the future. And we will support that. So yes. Welcome, Nakenya.
Yes.
Ooh. Hello. Thank you. I loved the recap, by the way, of my story. And as you guys previously stated, we worked together on my campaign. You guys provided a lot of supports and structure in areas that were absolutely necessary. I think being the first to do anything always comes with kind of the risk of I guess having difficulty finding that structure and finding, how you fit into doing things because you don't really see yourself in there. So it takes a lot of, self-direction, but even as a self-directive type of person, it's like important that I have that structure and that guidance and people who are brave and loving and are capable of helping me during those difficulties and triumphs. So thank you guys so much.
It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Really nice. It's always wonderful to meet a new person who's compassionate, caring, and loving, and an activist.
And courageous, given the things you faced as someone, African-American woman running in this particular city.
Yeah. So the mic is yours and you get to talk about whatever you want to feel like you need to get off your chest. And some people might ask questions, they might not. And you get to say whether you want to answer them or not. So you have a lot of control here.
Well, what do I do with all of this power? Thank you so much. When I was reading through my bio and kind of trying to present a picture of where I've been in the past, my upbringing or the disruptions and how I was able to put things together, it finally kind of hit me that I don't really talk about those aspects very often. And I think a lot of it is because I don't find them relevant. Like, I didn't use anything of, where I've been, as an example, as a platform to run for anything or to get involved in the community. I just show up and do what I can with what I have. I have, privately discussed a lot of the things that I've been through with other people. And I've noticed that I do it only when I feel like it's beneficial to someone else. And in most cases, help them understand that I understand where it is that they're coming from. You'll probably notice that my story touched on a ton of different issues, from racism to mental illness to the juvenile system, and trying to find my footing as an adult without a ton of support, especially in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a lot to be grateful for, and I just wanted to put that out there before I truly get started.
Yeah.
As stated before, I don't think I mentioned it, but the reasons why we were removed from the care of my parents was because my mom was paranoid schizophrenia. Mm-hmm. She was also a single mom of 3 kids. And we were there for a while with her struggling with reality, alone with her, and before anybody really stepped in. And so, we went back and forth of trying to establish, I guess more of a secure home with her, but it just wasn't necessarily possible. And so we needed to go in the care of other people, which in my case was more of the system, because a lot of people don't realize this, but when you're not a baby, you're not necessarily getting adopted. And, a lot of kids that end up in the system they come from places where there was disruptions, exploitations, and issues, right? So it takes, just like any other kid, leadership in their lives, structure, people that can help them heal and then get back to trying to figure out where they would best be utilized in life. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I decided to work with animals. My first job was with animals. I worked with reptiles. And I was like, I love this. It was just like the place for me. Even though I had a lot of experience with other things, I was one of those people who did not want to have where I've been define me as a human being. Like, I wanted my image to be mine and not necessarily overshadowed with other people's opinions or ideas, or were, succumbing to the things that I've been through as a marker for the type of human being I can exist as today. I know that that's like, for some people, it's probably difficult to understand what that even means, but for people who have gone through those kinds of things, they probably get it, because you have to be brave to a certain extent, but you also have to be capable of, being vulnerable, stepping into things that you really have no idea how it's going to turn out. And I feel like where I've been did help with a lot of that as an adult, right? I mean, we don't know how anything is going to turn out. So when we start things, some of us, need a lot of support to kind of push you to do things and build that structure, but a lot of us don't have that opportunity. And so we just have to take with whatever it is that we have and step out anyways and see what is possible. And that was exactly what I did here. I lived in this town, since 2005. And, I didn't have a ton of, like, I want to say experiences with racism in the town. It became more obvious to me when I became a mom. So I noticed like the groups that exist for moms in Martinez, I could not relate to a lot of people there at all. I mean, and sometimes, when I posted in those groups, it kind of turned into like some nonsense. And I was like, geez, what is going on here? I just didn't feel like I was welcomed that much. And maybe it was because I was a Black mom. I don't know what threat that would have done to that particular community. But again, we all need to have a place where we could go and take a load off of our shoulders and have a community that is going to do for us what that community did for them, And that is, to me, the ultimate purpose, I think, of community, right? We should not be forced to sit in anybody's shadow watching how well they do when we have the opportunities to excel in our own ways, and those things should be nurtured. But unfortunately, we live in a place where a lot of those spaces have been suppressed in a way to I guess, amplify other types of people. And that's where the term, lacking representation comes from. And there's always like this push to really, acquire platforms that other people have that just don't necessarily reach out to or inspire people like me, right? We want to see things that are just as good for us. And, we exist in a space or in a country that has thrived on, just projecting the images that they want to project. So it can get a little confusing sometimes, you have like your life experiences, but then you also have, the structures that are already in existence to try to keep you at a minimum, right? And I think that when we look at like the systemic issues involved with race, that was basically kind of what it was about, right? It was about a lack of resources, which means lack of opportunities. Usually when you have opportunities and you can excel, you're able to do a lot more with what you have. And enjoy your life a little bit more because you could make decisions for yourself. And that, if you look into the history for, African Americans to do was extremely dangerous for them because that was what they wanted. That was absolute freedom, right? Freedom to be able to have your own economy and not necessarily work as a slave in somebody else's business, right? Mm-hmm. And as cruel as it sounds, that was literally, I think, the core, of racism. It's a human condition. And when you talked about like white supremacy, and somebody was like, oh, that gives, that gives like the white people like power. I understand that. What I like to say instead is the ideology of white supremacy, because it makes it more of a psychological thing. And it's also kind of like, it's not a real thing, but it's real enough to like cause the death of people, but it's not like, like it's not in the Bible as, an actual thing that we all need to like bow down to. This is definitely man-made. And yeah, I got a little bit more involved after the incident with George Floyd in 2020. I think a lot of people were very just over it, I think would be the best words for it. Before that, I did not do a ton of protesting, or I didn't really have a lot of like connections to people, not because I wasn't loving or friendly. I just like, liked to do my own thing. And I think I realized, like, especially here, having a son who is both developmentally disabled and Black, those were two things that really pushed me out of where I was to get out there and make a difference. We had incidences here, like, white nationalist recruitment flyers. To me, those are really, important things to pay attention to as dangerous. But I noticed that, in our leadership, or even, police chief, it just was brushed off as if it was some kind of, oh, some kids probably did. And it's like, some kids probably did. Like, are you laughing? It's a joke. Like, I just did it. I noticed that there was a strong move to cover that up. And I was like, no, we're not going to be doing that today. So I had to seek guidance, like I said, because this was not something that was in my wheelhouse. I did have experiences that touched on every aspect, and that kind of given me like the strength to kind of do things against the grain, without feeling so overwhelmed with like how people are going to think about me that I just go hide. But I still was able to kind of reach out to people that I did happen to have relationships with that did these types of things. And that's where the group, the person who's over the group, her name is Sevgi Fernandez. She stepped in to really guide and to help us in the city. She put together the protest. There were a ton of people that came together. I guess it made it easier when the town went viral. So it's like, oh, that place, and so people started to come. And I noticed that, it inspired a lot of the people here to get involved too, right? You have like all these people from all these other places coming into your town to support your minorities. Like, where are you? And I think that also inspired people to get involved. And, it was important that it wasn't just, something that went on in the aftermath of George Floyd. And in a few months, we all just get back to our lives. And, the pattern that we always see in this country, like there's an awakening, there's a lot of frustration, everything comes to a boil, and then everybody has to let it out. And then we just like go back to acting like nothing happened and, suppressing it until the next time, So I wanted to do more than that. And honestly, I did not even realize that I had the ability to do any of these things. I was kind of pushed into the public eye a little bit, and, a target in most cases, but also kind of challenged to use my voice. I have never really done that before. I knew I had a voice because I've had to use it to maneuver with, I had to do well and stuff. In order to do that, I had to be a presence of my own. So I kind of had that, but that was like it. And I had nothing that would have really given me like this huge confidence to go and do all these extra things. And that was incredible, but it also helps me when I talk about like, we're coming up on Black History Month and Martin Luther King's birthday. I always try to remind people that if he had a choice, he probably would not have chose that, right? You're kind of put in a position where you have to kind of do something, and then you end up doing that. And I feel like that's just how it is for us, but it gets, communicated to be something else. Like, oh, this person just has all these abilities and they just, this is my desire. My desire is to always, protest structures that are not fair and wait all my time, like I could be on a beach somewhere, like relax. I mean, I'm like, let's not forget, like there's a whole world out there, but I'm doing this. And that's how I feel like all the other people feel too, right? Like it's kind of, the lack of justice. It's like hard to avoid that, it's like you can't just, especially when, it's people that look like you. So yeah, there's a lot that that kind of goes into it. And my understanding of systemic racism, in my experience, again, the lack of opportunities, you kind of have to work a lot harder to get things that you do see, like your white counterparts with less skills just have, and it takes a lot of courage and, probably somebody like me to ignore all of that and still go in with my own sense of self and feel like this is something that I could do, yeah. So I don't want to like go on and on or sound like I am rambling. If anybody has any questions, I am happy to answer.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. Do you want to read it? Or in the
Sure.
Q&A?
Yeah, and just quickly, just to give a little bit of background, I think, and Nakenya, you correct me if I'm wrong, but Nakenya mentioned the things that were going on in Martinez that pushed Martinez into national news was the city had put Black Lives Matter on one of the main streets by the courthouse and downtown area, and a couple actually went out and started painting over it. So Martinez quickly it became national news, and there was a lot that happened. We weren't here at that point in time, but Nakenya, you are very active at that point regarding what happened, and the city still hasn't really dealt with it, in my opinion, because they have not repainted that since that incident.
Nor have they created any other space where that can be painted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. No matter how many examples we gave, no matter how, like I said, I decided to run for city council after giving it a really good effort and realized that unfortunately we live in a place where if people have to identify you in power and identify with you in power in order for them to do what is considered the right thing. Otherwise, it doesn't really affect them in any way. And so there's no point in their mind of doing it. So it was, it was inspiring for me to get out there and try to do what I could do. So
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the question is, are there any books or resources you're presently using that support your newfound activism and our growing confidence to push back against these structures? Also, do you see a blog or book in the near future?
oh my goodness. I mean, I'll start with the second one first. I think this could be the start of me doing a little bit more and sharing a lot more about where I've been and the types of things that I've gone through that helped me be able to maneuver through these structures in a way that is kind of unique and, in comparison to other people. When it comes to books and different things like that, I really didn't find a lot that helped me in that area. However, there are a ton of leaders and people who have been doing this for a very long time. And even though, we're different people, there was still a lot to learn from them. And so I did receive some guidance from the East County NAACP, actually a ton of guidance. And I could still reach out for that guidance. They showed up to our city councils to really help us push a lot of the anti-discrimination task force. And, people really stood with us. I think that the unique part about what I'm doing is that I don't really see a lot of it, right? A lot of where I've been, I think I forgot to mention, it was a place where I was the only person with like color on my skin, right? So in my experience there was different, like I don't remember getting bullied a lot. I don't. People can be mean, but I think in a lot of ways it's bullying, they look for like the weakest link. And I kind of got along with everybody, but I was praised in a lot of ways, like for my skin or for my looks. And so I think that kind of saved a lot of like attacks, but it doesn't mean, like, my first job, I experienced like blatant racism. And so it did happen, but it happened when I came into this area, even though I was already existing in a place where it was like the same ratio of, people without any color on their skin versus those that were. Like, again, I was like the only person where I was, the only person where I worked, so it wasn't like something that for me, I had to fix or anything. It just almost seemed normal, right? Because I was dealing with a bunch of other stuff before I became an adult. So that wasn't really something that I paid that much attention to until it became something that I needed to pay attention to. And
case for a lot of people, I mean, we were stuck at home in the pandemic without, having to be remote, and then you're watching this 9-minute and 46-second murder on television, national, international TV. And it got a lot of people to that place of, I've got to do something, right? You mentioned leaders and other organizations, and I want to put one in the chat for folks. This is it's local, but I think they might be national. It's Showing Up for Racial Justice, and they do a lot of workshops and trainings. So you can check them out. But there are many, many, many wonderful organizations that support helping you become more present and articulate in the areas of activism, and supporting you with language development, supporting you with what language not to use, but also, how you can be a better ally as well. And then again, like we said in the beginning, we have a lot of things that we'll be sending out as resources at the end of the webinar. So hopefully to the person that asked that question, that was helpful. Feel free to comment in the chat, and welcome other Q&A. So I'm curious, Nakenya, when you mentioned kind of at your first job is where you experienced the most, like your first huge dose of racism. And I know that systemic racism was already taking place as far as the opportunities that were limited to you. Would you be comfortable sharing what that racist experience was at your work?
yes. So when you are 18 years old, you need to leave, what's considered the youth, portion. And so I think I was, I don't know, not too much older than that when I got my first job, because obviously I had to get out there and make a living.
And when you say the youth portion, you mean you had to leave foster care because you were 18.
Yes, you leave. Yeah, you're no longer a minor, and legally you need to move on. And so, I mean, I was lucky in a lot of aspects. I had people that still invested in me, making sure that I was safe. But yeah, to get my first job, I really had no idea like how it worked. I just went down, I took the bus from Clayton to Concord and literally walked around and took applications and filled them out like everywhere. Like I did not, I wasn't super picky. I had bills to pay. I wanted to try to get started with that. And so I ended up getting a job at a reptile place. And everybody who worked there was young. Again, the only Black person, it was a small owned business. I loved the business owner, loved his wife, his family. Everything there seemed great. And then the owner went out for vacation. So him and his family left. And so, just the regular people were in charge. And so that is when the incident happened. And I was just talking about this, but we were doing, it was like me and two boys. We were doing what we normally do. We were cleaning cages, we were giving water, and we were around each other kind of talking. And then the conversation turned to skin and what they thought was attractive. And one of the guys, I would say the boys, said, I don't like darker skinned women. They're just not attractive at all. And I was like, excuse me, like, are you calling me ugly? But I mean, it was like, okay. But then the other boy jumped in and they both started kind of almost ganging up. And it was like this weird energy of like, I don't know, this, I don't know, they just kind of bad off of each other and was just really being cruel with the things that they were saying. Obviously, I didn't really know how to deal with that. So I just kind of finished off my day. I didn't really say very much. And then I left. And so I had a feeling that I needed, to deal with that. Like I could have just like quit and never went back. But something inside of me said, you will never live that. You have to do this. You have to do something that is going to help you figure this out. Like I had no idea what to do, had no idea where to turn, which I thought was weird because we were like, okay, we're in this country. Like, why isn't there a blueprint on how to deal with this kind of stuff? But there definitely wasn't. But I did reach out to the friends that I did have, and I got a lot of different opinions of what to do, from legal action to just filing a complaint and blah, blah, blah. And so my issue there was the owner wasn't there. So it wasn't like, so if I filed a whole complaint on it, then it reflects them, when this was done as like an opportunity while the owner was away. So that wasn't going to work. And I did notice that it just really bothered me. I remembered like I was having nightmares. I was really experiencing like mental distress because of that. Like I was really bothered. And I realized like, okay, I do not want to live with this. Well, not by myself anyways. Like I came home with something I didn't leave with. And it was a emotional burden, and I felt like it was super important for me to deal with it. And so again, I had to create my own thing. So I went back, and I was brave, and I confronted those two boys, and I pulled them aside and just told them to shut up and let me, like I had some things that I needed to get off my chest. And, I went on about just basic decency, right? I personally didn't think any of them were cute, but I wouldn't say that to their faces because it's tacky. And so my approach was more of, just basic manners to your fellow man, right? I had to let them know that who they wanted me to be, or what type of person they were interested in isn't like, they're not the only men in the world, right? And there were tons of guys who liked dark-skinned women, and I was just really disappointed and hurt that they like attacked me like that. Like it was like a deliberate kind of a mean thing to do. And I felt like, ultimately at the end of that, I felt like I took my power back. I felt like they took it from me. It was super unexpected. And then me doing that, like, took it back. And I did not quit the job at all. I stayed there until I decided that it was time to move on. And what determined that was needing more money. So I started going to Diablo Valley College, and working part-time, doing something else. So I felt like that was really empowering in a lot of different ways. Because, I mean, first of all, when people kind of gang up on you, it feels uncomfortable. Obviously, I was not expecting that. And I never had to deal with it in that particular way. Like, I had no choice but to either, it was like fight or flight, like which one do you do and how do you do it? Obviously I needed a job. So just running away from a job wasn't going to be that helpful to me. But ultimately, I had a feeling when I left there that they would never do that again. And to me, that was the most important part that I didn't even get until after the fact. I was like, I bet you none of them would ever say that to a Black woman again. Like, did it change the world? No, but I mean, it shut those two up. So I mean, it was a good day. And yeah, I moved on. Like, I didn't dwell on it. I didn't feel like anything that they said was super important. I had to accept the fact that, yeah, that hurt, for people to attack me like that, but there was no truth to it. And it was inappropriate. And so I just dealt with it that way and moved on. When it comes to different opportunities, I have probably experienced more racism at work, but because I was just not, after that experience, I felt more empowered. And so I kind of, just found jobs that I felt were right for me at the time. But I did notice there was a lack of opportunities when it came to excelling. And a lot of my job, like in this field, there's a lot of white women. Even though we got along, like on the outside, I do think that it was a lot of these places were limiting as far as my growth was concerned in them. And so I know that I didn't see it as like, oh, they hate me because I'm Black, so let me leave. It was like, I saw it more as like, I'm not getting enough opportunities here. Like, I'm worth more than this. And I'm like over here. So I ended up again just finding a job. Most of the jobs that I'd gotten after, like everyone that I've had, like that I've like, I end up going somewhere that like paid more, that had a little bit more opportunities, whether I was able to do everything that I would like to do there or not. So yeah, there was always, like, when it came professionally, there was this, I was telling someone that I met at work this not too long ago, but, it was always really reserved and kind of quiet. Like, a lot of people came in and just blah, 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 blah. I mean, I talked, but I wasn't necessarily one of those people that would just tell on my business. And I don't think it was because I didn't have anything to talk about. I think because I had to create my own, professional persona, that to me, it was like a job. So I just had a different perspective on how I would behave or how much I would discuss there. And which is difficult to do when you work with animals in that particular way, because, it is kind of like an emotional job, and it is a job that can be quite sad. I definitely was able to show emotion when it was appropriate, but I just wasn't as comfortable as some of the other people were, just spending a ton of time talking about themselves. But I did sense that in a lot of those areas, I saw opportunities come easier for, white girls with the same skill set or whatever. So a lot of these places, especially in vet techs, there's still that grandfathering, like, oh, my parents were vets, so I'm just going to come in and be, and learn everything that I need to learn, and, oh, well, for everybody else. So I didn't meet a ton of people in this field that worked as, what do you call it? Like guidance, or, that same thing that I saw for the other girls. It didn't mean that, it wasn't possible. It just meant that where I was, it just, the opportunities didn't present itself. And I do think that that has a ton to do with it. There are people with tons of potential and tons of skills, and that could do a heck of a lot, that are kind of forced on the sidelines just due to circumstances or the structure of who's in charge. There could have also been, it was a place full of women. There could have been some intimidation on looks or whatever. But even then, I think when it came to my job, I was very, I dressed down, it wasn't like I was coming in to like be super glamorous. I would probably have poop on me, 5 minutes after showing up. So what is the point of this? It's too much work. So, there was that. But yeah, I think that when you are in areas where there's not a lot of women of color, you lack the opportunities to be uplifted. And so when I hear people, stepping aside for people of color, those are good gestures, otherwise, so there's a lot of people who have what it takes that just never get to have their moment to shine because there's no opportunities for them to do so. But with that said, I was still able to make friends everywhere I went. I was still able to develop bonds and enjoy myself, regardless to whatever the disappointment or happiness was in the area. Like I said, if it was too bad, which sometimes it started to be a little bit of a problem, I would just move on, and not really think about it that much. It's like, okay, this isn't working out. I'm starting to feel a lot more stress by being here. I'm starting to feel unhappy when I leave here. I'm starting to feel uncomfortable being too close to people. Like it's always something that, it undercurrently, it could have been racism. Obviously, in most of these places, I was the only Black person there. But again, I think it's super important. And I want to put this out there for, Black women, women of color. I didn't focus on the fact that I was the darkest one in the room, right? That was somebody else's problem. I look the way that I look. I feel gorgeous. I feel like validated by the universe. I don't have to care about who's around me and what they think. I think that's, my mom, before she passed away, she said something that stuck with me. She was like, you were always the girl I could never be. And I was like, what does that mean? She was like, you just don't give a damn what anybody thinks. I mean, my own mother said it. It's like, it must be true. But that's true. Like, I mean, I hear what people are saying, but I mean, maybe that's that, stubbornness or whatever. It's like, yeah, I hear you, but, I'm going to do this. And I think it's important, especially if you are of a group that is demoralized and put down. I think that a lot of these structures rely on your lack of self-esteem or your lack of just self-empowerment to really do anything. I think that was another thing that showed up running, for city council in this area as the first, ethnic woman of color to do, ethnic looking woman of color to do so, because, I think a lot of people were afraid for me and were like, well, what are you going to do about this? And what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. And I'm not even thinking about that. I want to do this. So this is what I'm going to focus on. And I feel like a lot of people may, and it may not just be for women of color. It could be, gender issues. It could be what people have this idea of what they think you should be based on whatever. And it is really difficult for them to let that go. And I've found that I need to not care. Whatever they think about me is on them. The only thing that I look for is the opportunity to, like, did I believe that I could do this? Did I believe that this was possible for me to do? And the answer was yes. And so I moved forward. I did not spend a lot of time thinking too much about, what could have been, what I would be afraid of. I mean, I was nervous just automatically of being like this new person trying to, run for a public office. So I felt like I had already enough going on to worry about what other people were thinking behind the scenes or in my face of what they felt that was what was possible for me to do. But ultimately, it was an amazing experience. I ran not just as a Black woman of color, but I was an authentic Black woman running. I did not hide anything, and people, they loved me. So that was also pretty awesome, right? Because, people had an idea of how I was going to be taken based on who I was and what I did and blah, 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 blah. Like in the past, like working with, or working against structures that had the ideology of white supremacy. They were like, oh, nobody's going to give you the time of day. But they did, and I had a feeling that they would. That was why I did it. So yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely fabulous. It's yeah, I mean, I think, there are a few things I wanted to kind of reflect back, when you said that you left that job upset because these boys had treated you in a certain way. I mean, you should be upset. That was not okay. I want to validate that upsetness. Like, yeah, it makes sense that you were upset. That was rude and disrespectful and racist. And the fact that you went back as an 18-year-old and spoke up for yourself and for darker skinned women, you shouldn't have to, right? You shouldn't have to. And you did. And that is one example of your courage. And then we witnessed you on the campaign trail and doing all these open speakings and, platforms and forums and just really showing up for yourself. That's a lot of people don't have either, no matter what their race, their skin color, their gender orientation, gender identity, sexual orientation. Confidence and love for oneself is very limited. And so witnessing that in you and hearing you talk about it is delicious.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you want to?
Well, and what people also don't know, and I hope Nakenya, it's okay, like your courage just shines through because a lot of all the candidates, but Nakenya wouldn't talk about race, wouldn't talk about diversity. I mean, they on the side they would, but not their platforms. And Nakenya would when she was speaking to people and when debates and the campaigning was happening. And I think it just goes back to that courage you have of saying, no, this is important and I'm going to talk about it. And that, came through when you told us the story, what happened in your place of employment when you were 18 and you confronted people. And the stories that we haven't even heard, I know there's a lot there. And I just know that spark and that piece of holding on to your own self-worth, like Misha was saying that, and using that as a guide to make an impact for yourself and others continuously. And I just really appreciate all you shared here tonight with us and your courage in going forward and in all the different experiences that you've had. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Say that one more time. I didn't hear you.
I said thank you for having me and inviting me here. So this is
Absolutely.
It's nice to do because I get to remember things that seemed so long ago,
Well, and I'll tell you, it was really beautiful watching you as we were reading your bio. I've been in certain situations where other people read my bio and it's like, whoa, that's me. And I loved you kind of claiming that, and I love all that you're claiming. I think it's really important and it's a great example. Yeah. So So we typically, those people who are in attendance, we will stop recording and live streaming and then invite anybody who wants to for casual conversation until 6:45 p.m. PST. So right now we're at 6:27 p.m. So it's about 17 minutes, 18 minutes. So I'm going to say, we're going to say goodbye to everybody on Facebook and everybody on YouTube. And I'm going to stop the live stream and I'm going to stop the recording.